Hey everyone, it's Enjoy English School. I'm Chris Gorski.
I'm Anthony.
And we have our science article today on September 23rd. It's called Living with Face Blindness.Face
blindness 就是脸盲。我不知道各位你们走在路上的时候碰到人，你有一个迎面走来人，看起来有点眼熟，可是又不太认得，你敢不敢去跟他打招呼啊？或者有的时候你会觉得说，我好像看过这个人，可是又想不起来他是哪里看过，叫不出名字。你有这种尴尬的情况吗？我们今天要介绍的主题呢，就是其实事实上，在一般人可能有些人不晓得自己有脸盲症，或者是发现到说，他以为认得人，马上可以认出人脸，然后叫得出名字。大家觉得会是一个稀松平常的事情，可是不是这样子的哦。有些人他们很辛苦，他们有脸盲的状况，所以说在社交啦或在生活当中都会碰到许许多多的困难。所以今天我们主题提到 Living with Face Blindness 与脸盲共存。如果说今天你有脸盲的状况的话，你一定要来看看我们今天这篇文章哦。
So, our subtitle today is, What if faces are the one thing you just can't remember?
好，我们看看这个副标题，他说 What if? What if 的话就是假如怎么样？Faces are the one thing you just can't remember. 假如你就是脸盲怎么办？脸就是你记不得的这个事情怎么办呢？
I think it's pretty common to forget people's names. But forgetting people's faces is maybe a little rarer.
好，老师就说了，可能对于一般人来说，忘记对方的名字，感觉上比较常听得到。但是如果脸都想不起来的话，好像比较少一点，好像是这样，对不对？那我自己的话，我觉得我比较擅长认人家的脸，但是我记名字的时候，有的时候会记得不准确。我记得有一次我们在开场的时候，他说 Welcome to Enjoy English School. Here's Anthony, and I said.And he is Chris Gorski with a question mark. 所以说有的时候会记名字会有点难，但是记脸我觉得没问题。
Do you know how I do that? On my phone, when there are people that I just met, or I only see them sometimes, like 之前健身房我会看到一个，那个偶尔看到一位。I write their name and 我写like2、3句有关那个人 and I'm like, oh, this was Gus. He's the big guy that's really friendly and he likes to speak English with me. So I write that down and then before I go to that place, I actually check because I'll often see them because I forget their names all the time.
你人真好，很多时候就是我们还需要一些场景、一些记忆帮助我们记得这个人。很多时候你如果是常在餐厅看到他，下次在篮球场看到他的时候，你就觉得这个人好像看过，可是就想不起来。所以很需要情境场景的搭配。
Yeah, try that. Maybe that works. But if you're face blind, how do you do that? So our sentence begins, one of the most basic elements of human relationships is the ability to recognize a familiar face. Woo! That's a hard sentence.
没错，所以第一段的第一句话我们看到他说 One of the most basic elements. 各位先把 one of 先圈起来。圈了这个之后，你就连个箭头连到后面 basic elements 这个地方的 s， 所以以后你在讲到 one of 的时候，你就心里头就有一个隐藏的箭头，后面要记得用复数的形态，这样才会有之一的问题嘛。好，他就说了，其中一个最基本的元素 elements 之一呢 of human relationship 人跟人之间的人际关系很重要的一个基本元素之一呢 is the ability to recognize a familiar face 就是认得一張比自己很熟悉的臉。
Okay, pick up your pencil. We got a few things to write. Basic means simple. Write it down. S-I-M-P-L-E. Now, an element really just means a part. P-A-R-T. And then we have human. We won't say people here. We don't say people relationships. We have to say human relationships. And lastly, recognize is short E. We say recognize, write short E here.
没错啊，特别注意一下 recognize 那个 red 的这个声音 recognize like red 那个 recognize.
Next, our sentence says, people will be happy to see the face of an old friend whom they might not have seen in years.
好，第二句话呢，它有牵涉到一个文法，我们来看一下。People will be happy to see the face of an old friend。好，人们会很喜欢、很开心的看到一张脸，这张脸是他老友的脸。一看到老友的脸，好久不见了，天哪，很高兴，对不对？ 这个 friend 后面有一个 whom 的话呢，你在使用的时候，你就可以知道它在后面这个子句里头扮演的是受词的角色。但是你看一下 ，They might not have seen something in years， 他们很久很久没有看过，好几年没有看到这个是什么呢？这个就是老友。所以在这里的话，你会注意到这个 whom 的后面一定会缺一个受词，而且这个受词呢，它会是在这里面被隐藏起来，移到前面去的。所以这里的话，你可以说 that they might not have seen in years， 你也可以都不讲，也都可以。
But what happens when you don't have the ability to recognize people?
好，接下来他提到一个可能的发生状况，或是一个假设的情况。But what happens when you don't have the ability to recognize people？ 可是如果说今天你连认人的能力都没有的话，那个时候该怎么办呢？
Our next paragraph begins about 2.5% of the human population suffers from face blindness.
好，我看到这句话的时候，其实我吓了一跳，说哇，这比我想象中的这个比例还要高哎。他就告诉你说，原来啊，在我们的这个所有的人口里头，差不多有2.5%的人会有这种脸盲的状况。About 2.5% of the human population suffers from face blindness. 好，它会有脸盲的状况。这边特别注意一下 suffers， 所以你可以知道说前面的 2.5% of the human population 整个是当做单数的方式来使用。即便你说那有很多人呢，没有，这边用单数的使用，他们有2.5%的人这样的比例会有出现脸盲，深受脸盲这样的情况所苦。
So we have some tricky things here. We have 那个点 and 那个pa，对不对？ Write them out in English. They're actually really easy. So 那个点 we don't say dot here. 我们要写 point. P-O-I-N-T. 写下来。Then we have 那个 pa, we have percent. 这个是一个单词 P-E-R-C-E-N-T. 然后这个 percent 的 cent 你画一条线，这个就是100的意思。
事实上在法文里面 cent 这个字 cent 就是100。好，在这里的话就是这样的方式来表达。
Our next sentence says, it means that they have trouble remembering familiar faces.
好，接下来他就说了 ，it means that 也就是呢 ，they have trouble remembering familiar faces。这边注意一下，在我们这篇文章里面呢，好，最重要的一个概念，也要跟各位讲的是，觉得做什么事情很难的话，你给我几种说法。在这边我们碰到第一种 ，have trouble doing something. It means that 很多人不晓得什么叫做 face blindness， 对不对？他就告诉你说，这个字的意思就是指这些人 have trouble remembering familiar faces， 对于他们已经看过的脸孔，要记得其实是很难的。
Now the word familiar, A 法短语 familiar is related to the word family, but the pronunciation is different. Family, of course we know is a short A. This is familiar.
要特别注意，它是从 family 来，但它的重音因为变了，所以会念 familiar 或 familiar 都可以。
Good. Yeah, familiar is totally fine. I just don't say it that way. Our next sentence says, some people even struggle to recognize their own face in the mirror or in photos.
哇，天哪！你看，甚至有些人 ，some people even struggle to. When you say struggle, that means it's hard for you, right? 就是很辛苦的、很挣扎的，才能认得 to recognize their own face in the mirror or in photos. 甚至他们有人看到自己的照片上的自己，或是看到镜中的自己，都觉得，哎，这个张脸啊，是我自己啦，这样。
Yeah, that's weird because today we can see our face very easily. Mirrors are cheap. You have a cell phone. But think like 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
How often did you see your face?
不是很少有机会看到，因为没有镜子，也没有手机嘛。
That's right. You know, when I read this, do you know what I thought about? You know, I just 我就突然想到这个，这很恐怖。I just说，我没办法看到我自己的骷髅头。
哦
Is that a weird thing?
Yeah.
我看是很少可以看到自己的脸，我也没有看过我自己的
骷髅头长怎么样，是不是？你去照那个 X 光就看到了。
I don't want to see it. All right, let's take a quick break. Hey everyone, welcome back to Enjoy English School. We're starting paragraph 3. It begins. For children with this condition, it can be difficult for them to make friends.
好，接下来我们在第3段里头呢，就要说明一下，说在小朋友跟成人身上呢，到底他这种脸盲的情况会对他们造成什么困扰？第3段的话，我们讲的是小朋友的状况。For children with this condition 的话就是指这种情形。好 ，condition 听起来的话，感觉上是比较中立一点的说法哦。It can be difficult for them to make friends. 他们在交友上面就会碰到一些困难了。
All right, and Anthony says it perfectly here. This condition, you might hear other people say different words. We can say condition or disorder. Disorder is D-I-S-O-R-D-E-R. Condition and disorder 到底是一样的事情 but disorder sounds really bad, like serious. So a doctor doesn't want to make you feel afraid. And we don't want people to judge you. Oh, 他有这个什么问题 We're not going to say he has a disorder. We'll say condition because disorders and conditions 你没办法控制，它就发生了。Now, a disease, D-I-S-E-A-S-E, disease is like maybe 有什么细菌还是什么，它会让你生病。
没错，所以提到是疾病症状的话，我们有很多不同的字汇。Disease 给人感觉是因为这细菌啊各种菌类造成的疾病，那种时候叫 disease。但如果说今天是你身体有一些不同于其他人的一些状态，比方说我上前天的话，我看到一个 vitiligo， 就是在讲到那个白斑的状况，就是身上出现一块一块的白斑。那这种的话，如果你今天提到的是 disorder， 那给人感觉是比较负面的，好像病症啊、症状啊。用症这个字，但如果你今天讲说这种情况，你可以用 condition， 听起来就比较中性一点点。
Yeah, it's a more popular word to use, condition. Next, when they do, they often make friends with kids who have very clear or special features. I think that's so interesting.
他说 when they do, They often make friends with kids who have very clear or special features. 所以他们今天真的要交朋友的话，一定要找那种可能头发特别尖的啦
or really big ears.
这种五官非常明显，一看到这个大耳朵，一看就知道是谁。他们就会去交那些朋友 with kids who have very clear or special features. 五官这特征非常非常明显的朋友，就会变成他们的好朋友哦。
I think that's so interesting. I want to see who those kids are. I want to see what they look like.
Yeah, 没错。
All right, the next sentence says, they may also have a hard time following the plots, the stories of movies, as they can't recognize different characters.
OK， 接下来他下一句话就告诉你了 ，They may also have a hard time following the plots of movies。这个地方特别注意一下 ，have a hard time following。有没有想起来？我们刚刚在前面的时候，我们有曾经提到了 have trouble remembering something， 对不对？一样的意思。如果你发现到做什么事情很困难的时候，你可以说 have trouble doing something。或者像这句话 have a hard time doing something， 所以这边讲说 they may also have a hard time following the plots of movies， 他们在看电影的时候也很难跟着这个情节走，为什么呢？As 就是 because 的意思 ，they can't recognize different characters。不同的角色看起来，这个角色是 A 吧？不，他是 B。哦，那个 B 又来，不，他是 A。你这样看下去，天哪，我都不认得，就很难跟着剧情走。所以在这里的话 ，recognize different characters，character 指的是剧中的角色。
Good. And now, in the end of paragraph 2, we had the word struggle that Anthony talked about. Circle the word struggle. It's the last sentence of paragraph 2. And draw an arrow down to have a hard time following. We can say they may also struggle to follow the plots of movies.
没有错，所以在这边的话，我们也可以把这个之前看到这个 struggle， 对不对？在这边 have a hard time 也一样。They may also， 你可以讲说 they may also struggle to follow the plots of movies， 也可以用这种方式去表达。这样的话，你在表达相关概念的时候，你的灵活度就会多很多哦。
Good. And our next sentence says, therefore, they usually watch cartoons.
所以如果是这样子的话 therefore they tend to watch cartoons， 他们呢就比较倾向去看怎么样卡通好了。比方说像我之前看到樱桃小丸子，好，但它里面每一个角色都有各式各样的不同的那种五官特征，有的头像弹头一样，各式各样的花轮的发型就很帅，对不对？那样的话就很容易记得每个角色的差异。
Yeah, I thought of the Lion King and Aladdin. Like Aladdin, you have a big blue genie, you have a bird, you have a snake, right?
对。 没错，没有像阿拉丁啊，就是在里面的角色每一个样子都长得不一样，你很难弄混。但是如果说是看电影的话，觉得哦，这两个人长得好像哦，就无法分辨。
Our next sentence says, as for adults, they may struggle with jobs in which recognizing faces is important.
好，所以在这边的话呢，第4段它的第一句话就讲了，那刚刚前面是讲小朋友，现在成人有这种状况会怎么样呢？ As for adults, they might struggle with jobs in which recognizing faces is important. 好，在这边他讲说，他们如果说选择的这个行业跟工作，认脸的这个能力很重要的话，他们就很辛苦了。比方说，今天如果你是在做美容美发的，要跟客人聊天的，上次还聊过，在路上走到，然后你就不认识人家，然后觉得说，哎，上次我跟你聊那么开心，你居然不认得我，这种情况下就会很受伤，对不对？所以在这里他特别注意一下 in which， 好，所以是 in which 这个 which 是指 jobs，so in these jobs。Recognizing faces is important. 用这种方式去记的话，就很简单，可以理解这句话的意思。
Got our next sentence says, for example, how can you work in customer service if you can't tell who is a regular customer and who is a new one?
他就举例啦。他说，举例来说吧 ，How can you work in customer service？ 好，你怎么样能够去在这种服务业啦、客服的这种方向这个地方工作？如果你没有办法分辨 ，if you can't tell who is the regular customer， 如果一个人是常客，天天来，你天天来，你也天天不认得，这样就很生气、很受伤，对不对 ？And who is a new one？ 如果是新客人，你以为他是老客人，这样也不行，所以你要很清楚的去发现哦，认人很重要。
You know, actually, I've had a little of this in my own classroom because I started a new class just a few months ago, and everybody has to wear masks. So these are little kids.And I have never seen them without a mask. So I only see them like this plus 口罩 plus a mask.
Yeah.
We started teaching online last week. And so when the kids are at home, they don't wear a mask. And I have never seen their faces, full faces. So 可能他们用那个网络，他们还没改名字 like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Right.
or they use their Chinese name. I don't know who that is. So I say,Who are you? And I'm like, you, the student. And I make the picture really big. Who are you? And they're like, I'm Sandy. And I'm like, wow, that's
Sandy.
I never saw your face before.
没有错，因为这个时候很多时候你看到，因为疫情开始之后，大部分人上课都戴口罩嘛，所以你如果说是新的课、新来的新学生，你只能看到他上面这一块。那一旦他们到了线上课程的时候，他们在家里头脱掉口罩之后，你看哦，原来你下面这边是长这样，会一时间认不出来。其实事实上，在疫情的情况之下，大家对于这种脸盲的这种人也算是蛮友善的，因为你这样的话，你就有借口说我认不出来你是正常的，因为你戴了口罩。所以说在这里的话，老师就提到说，他在教书的时候会碰到那种没有看过他整张脸，然后在家里看整张脸的时候，突然间认不得。
Our next sentence says,Interestingly, many adults who suffer from face blindness may not be aware that they are affected by the condition.
好，他最后说 ，Interestingly， 好，可是很有趣的事情是，许多的成年人呢 ，who suffer from face blindness may not be aware that when you say may not be aware, may not know， 他们搞不好有的人自己有脸盲症，但是却不晓得自己有脸盲症，所以说呢 ，that they are affected by the condition， 他们受到了这样子的这个情况的影响。所以说，像我自己的妈妈，她在看这些西洋电影、好莱坞电影的时候，她说：“哎，这个是谁啊？哦，这个是 A， 这个是谁啊？那个是 B。”所以我现在开始有点强烈怀疑，我妈妈是有一点点脸盲的状况。
You know, I suppose we all have our own weaknesses.
That's true.
All right, let's get ready for vocab review.All right, it is time for vocab review, and our first word is an element.
Element 就是基本元素的意思，老师刚刚有提到那个 part, P-A-R-T， 这样也很好记。
Our next word is to recognize.
To recognize 就是认得某人，一看到就可以认出来是谁。
That's right, and 这个不是长义 it's 短义 recognize. Next, we have a population.
population 就是指人口，我们提到 2.5% of the whole population 就是全部总人口的2.5%。
Number 4, we have a verb to suffer from.To
suffer from 就是受到后面这个东西影响，好苦于这样的疾病啦，或是状态。
Number 5, a condition.condition
好，就是这样的情况情形，比 disorder 啊都要中性一点的说法。
Number 6 and 7, we have very closely related phrases to struggle to do something.
To struggle to do something 就是做这件事情很痛苦、很困难、很挣扎。
And number 7, to have a hard time doing something.
当然，你也可以用这种方式表达 have a hard time doing something.
Or have a hard time with something.
To have a hard time with something. 好，后面接一个名词也是可以的。当然，你也可以说 have trouble doing something， 也是一样的说法哦。
And next we have to be aware of something.
To be aware of something, that means you know it. 好 ，aware 就是知道，形容词会搭配 be 动词 be aware of or be aware that 接子句。
All right, and that is all the time we have for today, but this is just day 1. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with day 2 of our face blindness story. I'm Chris Gorski.
I'm Anthony.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
第48页科技新知与脸盲共存
Living with face blindness. One of the most basic elements of human relationships is the ability to recognize a familiar face. People will be happy to see the face of an old friend whom they might not have seen in years. But what happens when you don't have the ability to recognize people? About 2.5% of the human population suffers from face blindness. It means that they have trouble remembering familiar faces. Some people even struggle to recognize their own face in the mirror or in photos. For children with this condition, it can be difficult for them to make friends. When they do, they often make friends with kids who have very clear or special features. They may also have a hard time following the plots of movies, as they can't recognize different characters. Therefore, they tend to watch cartoons. As for adults, they might struggle with jobs in which recognizing faces is important. For example, how can you work in customer service if you can't tell who is a regular customer and who is a new one? Interestingly, many adults who suffer from face blindness may not be aware that they are affected by the condition.